welcome to another episode of our Halloween extravaganza. Today we are taking seat at the Banquet of the Dead, which is a Yorkshire folktale, which sort of starts with a committee meeting outlook before it gets into the proper tale. So that is how we are going to say this story. On Sheep Street Hill in the town of Skipton in Craven in North Yorkshire is a blacksmith shop commonly called the Parliament House. And during the late war it was sort of a meeting ground for all the eccentric characters in the village. And that is where they would sort of swap stories, they would swap tales, and talk about the various political dealings of the day, according to their local paper. And on one winter's morning in the winter of 1814, all the papers were delayed due to a heavy snowfall, and the guys that were gathered round in this sort of committee setting that could just swap stories and everything had nothing to do. And so they started swapping fictional stories.
When Dave Bat got decapitated.
That wasn't the great storm.
Well, it was pretty damn great.
No, the greatest storm was the one when old Harold got blown into the quarry.
Oh, that. The great wind.
The what?
And this is one such story that they touted out as being a real thing rather than a fictional one. So one of them stood up and said, well, I don't want you to leave and not have anything to communicate to your families on your go back home, so I will regale you with this legend of our fair village, with one of the numerous legendary tales around their corner of Yorkshire. And in this instance, Kirkby Malmdale. They all agreed, and this is the narration that I am going to present to you right now. This is the tale of the Banquet of the Dead. It was the 14th day of July in the year 1635 when the corpse of a villager was interred in the churchyard of Kirkby Malmdale. The service finished and all left the churchyard except the sexton, Silas Shaw, a village lad of the name of Kitchen, and a soldier whose long flowing silvery hair and time-worn frame bespoke a very advanced age. He was seated on a neighbouring stone from where he raised his eyes to the church and sighed. Old Silas gazed on the stranger but didn't recognise him, which meant that he couldn't be a local. This was not a nook or corner of the valley, nor of the adjacent one of Otterdale, not a solitary dwelling of which he could not name the dwellers. Man, woman and child. Silas puzzled over him and decided that he'd been a soldier in the King's army, one of the remnants of Marston Moor perhaps. While he pondered, old Silas had been very leisurely pursuing his work. The grave was not yet filled up, and a skull, the remnant of some former occupier of the same narrow cell, was lying beside it. Kitchen took up the skull and gazed on the sockets. The old soldier observed the boy and, approaching, said, "Youth, that belonged to one who died soon after the reign of Queen Mary. His name was Thompson. He was a military man, and as mischievous a fellow as ever existed. Aye, for many a long year he was a plague to Malmdale." "Then," replied the boy, "his death must have been a benefit. The valley must have felt rid of a pest." "Dude, this kid." "Why," answered the veteran, "I fear you are in the wrong. Thompson's reign is not yet finished. 'Tis whispered he often returns and revisits his old scenes, nay, even plays his old pranks over again. It is by no means improbable that, at this very instant, he is at no great distance and listening to our conversation." "Indeed," said Silas, and the sexton rested on his spade and winked at the soldier. "That will not do. I have been a sexton for many a long year, and I know a trifle or two about ghosts. I often see them, but only after dark. They're like drunkards, fond of late hours. A ghost walking in broad daylight and beneath a broiling July sun? Come, I like that idea well. I wonder where you studied spectrology." "You hit too hard," said the boy to the sexton. "I dare say that the old gentleman there knows more about such than you do. I believe him, but what an old brute this dead man must be. He will neither rest himself nor allow other folks to do so." Kitchen kicked the skull from him and remarked as he heard its hollow sound, "Well, there's not much there now, whatever was there before." "Boy," said the soldier, "you dare not do that again." "Why not?" inquired Kitchen, giving it at the same time another hearty kick. "Kick it again," said the soldier. The boy needed no encouragement, and so there was another kick. The veteran stranger smiled grimly as if pleased with the spirit which the boy showed, and then said in a joking way, "Now take up that skull and say to it, Let the owner of this meet me at the midnight hour, and invite me to a banquet spread on yon green stone by his bony fingers. Come ghost, come devil, come good, come evil, or let old Thompson himself appear, for I will partake of his midnight cheer. Kitchen, laughing with the glee of a schoolboy, repeated the ridiculous invitation, and the no less ridiculous rhymes. He then turned toward the soldier and asked if that would do, or if he had any further requirements, as he should be happy to oblige him. But the warrior was no longer visible. He had disappeared amid some lofty limes that then shaded the churchyard. Old Silas had finished his work, and just as the shadow on the dial fell on the hour of 12, he left the churchyard for the neighbouring inn, the boy at the same time vaulting over the stile that led from the churchyard to the schoolhouse. Later that day, Kitchen, at his usual hour of 10, retired to rest, and soon fell into a deep slumber, from which he was roused by someone rattling the latch and singing beneath the windows. He arose and opened the casement. It was a calm, moonlit night, and he distinctly saw the stranger who was rapping at the door and chanting the elegant stanzas which he had dictated at the grave of the villager. "And pray, sir, what might you be wanting at this time of night?" asked the boy, wholly undaunted by the strangeness of the visitation. "If you are not fond of going to bed, I am, I assure you." "What?" replied the stranger. "Hast thou so soon forgotten thy promise?" And he repeated the foolish lines. Kitchen laughed, but the soldier assumed a peculiar expression. The full gaze of a dark eye, which appeared to glow with something inexpressibly wild and unearthly, was bent upon the boy, who felt a strange sensation steal over his frame, and began to repent of his ill-timed levity. After a short silence, the stranger again addressed him, but in tones so hollow and sepulchral that his youthful blood was chilled, and his heart beat strongly and quickly and audibly. "Boy, thy word must be kept. Promises made with the grave must not be lightly broken. Amidst the cold graves of the coffin dead is my table decked and my banquet spread. Then haste thee thither without delay. Nigh is the time. Away, away." "Then be it as you wish," said the boy, in some slight degree resuming his courage. "Go, I will follow." At a short distance from the church, on the banks of the Aire, was a small cottage, the residence of the Reverend Martin Knowles, the vicar of the parish, who was still sat at his desk preparing a sermon. He jumped as the quiet was broken by a hurried and violent knocking at the door. It was Kitchen, with a face as pale as a winding sheet. "Kitchen," said the minister, "what brings you here at this untimely hour?" He gave a somewhat confused and rushed account of everything that happened, and asked for the minister's help. The minister and the lad proceeded towards the churchyard. The minister looked around, but no one was visible at first, until a dark, shadowy form appeared, slowly gliding amidst the tombstones. It approached, and as it came closer, the minister recognised the mysterious being described by the terrified boy. The figure stopped and said, "1, 2! How is this? I have one more guest than expected, but it matters not. All is ready. Follow. Amidst the cold graves of the coffin dead is my table decked and my banquet spread. Haste ye thither without delay. Now is the time. Away, away." The figure waved its arm impatiently, and, beckoning them to follow, moved on in the precise and measured step of an old soldier. Having reached the altar window, it turned towards a corner of the building and proceeded directly to an old green stone. Upon it a feast was prepared. The stone was plentifully bedecked, yet it was an awful sight to see, where, till now, none but the earthworm had ever revelled, a banquet prepared as for revelry. The boy looked on the smoking viands, and a strange thought crossed his mind. At what fire were these provisions cooked? The seats were coffins, and Kitchen every instant seemed to dread lest the owners should appear and join in the ghostly banquet. Their ghostly host having placed himself at the head of the table, he motioned his guests to do the same. The minister, who was rather an epicure, glanced his eyes over the stone, and finding that necessary accompaniment to a good supper, salt, was missing, exclaimed in an astonished tone, "Why, where's the salt?" When immediately the stranger and his feast vanished, and of all that banquet nothing remained save the mossy stone whereupon it had been spread.